Test, test, test. Morning, everyone. Morning, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Morning. Could everybody have a seat, please? Morning. Welcome to the 6th Michael R. Argetsinger Symposium. Good morning once again, if I could have your attention. I'm Mark Steigerwald, the Executive Director of the International Motor Racing Research Center. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 6th Annual Michael R. Argetsinger Symposium here at Watkins Glen International. We're fortunate to have this space, even though the track is cold, and essentially racing is over in the Northeast for the season, but the track generously allowed us to use this space, so we're grateful for that. And yes, if you're feeling the same thing I am, it's odd to be on a circuit where there's no race haulers in the paddock, so we have the place to ourselves. Unfortunately, we can't drive the track. Although the pandemic interrupted our series, we're grateful to be back with our partner, the Society of Automotive Historians, and an impressive lineup of speakers and topics, several of who are remote. We're very grateful for their time and their off-schedule participation here. Our thanks to Bob Barr and the Society of Automotive Historians and our presenters who have taken the time to benefit us all to add to the scholarly canon. Although I have not attended past symposia, I know some of the principals, including Don Capps, who has joined us here this weekend. I remember Don from way back when, during my first chapter at the Research Center, Don would stand in front of the copying machine. By the time he left, he would have a stack of paper about this high. So it was much before he adopted the digital model. And the same applies to Michael Argetsinger. So Michael and I worked closely on his first 3 book projects. I was always grateful to work with Michael. He was very methodical in his research, and he was very particular about his photos. We worked closely with David Bull Publishing back at the time, and Michael was, again, very thorough with his subject matter, and David Bull insisted on doing his own scanning. He didn't particularly appreciate our efforts internally, which have come a long way more recently. I should also mention that Michael's beautifully restored Eldon Mark 10B Formula Ford is on display at the Research Center. This is courtesy of Rick Dresang, who drove the car out about a week or so ago. You'll be able to see that tonight at a reception at the Research Center that has been sponsored by the Watkins Glen Area Chamber of Commerce. Nagar Hale is here joining us with her husband. Hi, Nagar, and thank you again for that. Also, if anyone is curious, our beautiful Corvette C8R that you might have noticed when you came in this morning is parked out front. That is our sweepstakes car for the year. It's a major fundraiser for us. You can purchase tickets on our website at racingarchives.org. So your support there is very much appreciated. In closing, I'll mention that next year marks our 25th anniversary of service, the Research Center, that is. So look for developments throughout the year as we consider our expansion. We'll have some exciting news to share with everyone at that time. And finally, last but not least, GT Motorsports is providing live streaming of the symposium this weekend. Eric drove up from the Washington, D.C. area yesterday, and he's providing the service free of charge. Thank you, Eric, very much. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Bob Barr, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome everybody. It's good to be back, I'm sure, after a 2-year hiatus. Not only being back after 2 years, 2 firsts for the symposium. We have Zoom presenters. We have 7 of them today and tomorrow. And Eric Montestrelli is over there in the booth. We spent a day here yesterday putting all this stuff together, and he added more equipment this morning. Grand Touring Motorsport. He has a website, he does blogs, he does all kinds of video stuff. His information's over on the table. So please, when you get home or during the weekend, take a look at what he does. We really appreciate all the time and effort he's put into this completely gratis. We have 7 Zoom presenters over the next 2 days from Australia, Belgium, Italy, Scotland, and New Zealand. And one from Nevada and another from South Carolina. You'll notice on your schedules we have break time in the morning and afternoon, 15 minutes or 30 minutes, depending on the schedule. And then lunch each day is 90 minutes. So you run from usually noon to 1:30. So please be back here in your seats at 1:30 each day. You can ask those of you who are not local that don't know the nearby eating establishments, how to get which ones you can get in and out quickly. Ask any of us, or I'm not a local, but I'll hook you up with one of the staff of the center who can help you out in that respect. But just, again, bear in mind, 90 minutes. You'll notice that we have blinds down on the side windows. When the presentations start, I'm going to close all the blinds. We were playing with that yesterday. That brightens up the screen. I know you want to see the track, and we'll open them up again during lunchtime. But with the blinds shut, this gets a lot clearer. And back table, we have Joe Freeman from Racemaker Press. Will be selling his book. And Gordon Elliott White, the Miller Man, will be back there selling his book. So visit with them and check out what their publications. At this point, I want to introduce somebody I'm really delighted is here this time. He wasn't sure he was going to be able to make it. He's had a trying year, but he's pulled through, and he is one of the originators of this symposium. And I hope he'll give us a little historical review of it, now that we're in number 6. Don Capps, please come on up. Now, Don is also my predecessor as president of the Society of Automotive Historians. So I remember a meeting at the Studebaker National Museum in South Bend where you kind of ensnared me into being the Veep. Yeah, and here we are. So, Don, it's all yours.
Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. John and some of the others have been here, Skip, Joe, some of the folks that have been around for a while. I want to thank Duke. Duke, stand up, please. In the military, I'm a fighter. I'm a Ranger, Special Forces, aviator, whatever. But if you can't support it, you can't do it. That's a logistics guy right there that for the last couple of years has made this all happen. And it's very important. What I want to talk about for just a few minutes, I could go for an hour. I'm so unaccustomed to public speaking. But when we started this, it was a long time ago. Mike and I had this idea that the Research Center should sponsor some type of conference, symposium, whatever. And we got a lot of pushback for various reasons. We were both busy. I was spending a lot of time in the desert. Mike had a lot of things that were going on. So not until about 2011 or 12 that we finally decide that we really just need to do this. Easier said than done. We ran into some issues, but finally, we decided it's not worth asking permission, let's just do it. Unfortunately, Mike, illness intervened, and he passed away right before, like in July, before we had our first one in October. But it was Mike and Gene Argetsinger who really came up with this whole idea. I was indicted co-conspirator in this, along with Cameron and everybody else, because I'm an academic, but as I have tried to make it clear to a lot of people, academics have to have a great deal of enthusiasm for what they do, because we spend time like monks in solitary, way in the archives, going through all that material, and then we write these papers, with footnotes, by the way, so that only 8 or 10 people have an interest in it, get it. It's starting to happen in motorsport. The Argetsinger Symposium, which initially was for Gene, now it's for Mike. The first one we had was an interesting experience for all of us involved. And I have to say I'm so sorry that my other partner in this endeavor, Pat Young, who's had some surgery lately and cannot make it for obvious reasons. Her health won't permit it. University of Houston, she is one of the early people in academic motorsport history. Started many, many years ago, probably in the 70s, not long after she got her doctorate. And she has probably read every single presentation that was presented for consideration over the years. She has been an absolute gem. She has come up with ideas, she has made suggestions. Without Pat, we probably would not be this successful. So again, I'm sorry that Pat can't be here, but I'm hoping her ears are burning and she's suitably embarrassed by all that. Our first one, we had 3 people. It was kind of a panic because I had 2 people lined up, and unfortunately I didn't have a third. And Pat and I were going to flip a coin who was going to do a paper, and suddenly someone popped up out of nowhere. And we had 3 Canadians, so we were truly an international symposium. That helped a great deal. What we did not realize was the fact that we had kicked something off that was going to start taking a life of its own. The next year, Mark and John and a number of other who were in the room said, "Hey, let's go to Watkins Glen." November is probably not the ideal time to be here, but it's something that's important. And I think that in the time that we've been doing this, before we're so rudely interrupted after 2019, that I think we've done something good. The number of people that are involved, the speakers, this year, look at the numbers we've got. 2019, 2018, the number of topics. I went back over this just recently, and I was amazed. It is an incredible length and breadth of topics in motorsport. American, international, you name it. So I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we continue to do this and expand. We are truly, and unfortunately, unique. There aren't many other places that someone with an academic background can come and present a paper, an academic paper, in the field of motorsport. I love NASH, the North American Society of Sports History. They've run hot and cold on this. I've been a member of NASH for many, many years. I belong to a number of other of these various historical organizations. It's beginning to thaw a little bit, but it's just like everything else. If you don't help yourself, nobody else will. The International Motor Racing Research Center has stepped up. The Society of Automotive Historians has stepped up. Thank you, Bob, for taking this on. I've been very impressed with what he's done in my absence this year. The thing that I want to make clear to everyone here is that enthusiasm covers a lot of space. Yeah, you've got those who are hobbyists, who are enthusiasts, who love the sport, whatever it may be. Tom over here is sprint cars. It's amazing that one of the most incredible people I've come across, Paul Sheldon, the late Paul Sheldon, who did the series of books on a record of Grand Prix and voiturette racing, was a diehard sprint car fan. And he's in England. That amazed me. We had that in common because the first time I saw a sprint car race when I was very small up in Indiana, I was hooked. It is the most amazing thing. Same thing with Grand Prix and Formula One, which I have seen, and so forth. There's a lot of room in there. Those enthusiasts are important. A lot of what they do is folklore, let's be honest about it. But it's important. It's a part of what motorsport is all about. Then you've got the academics over here. We're a fairly small group. We love what we do, just like these people. One of the things that we have tried to do, and I think we've been pretty successful over years, is to get those two groups together. They're not really that far apart. The biggest difference that I have found, and the only real difference, is footnotes. That's it. It's footnotes. As an academic, I've spent something like 50 years in the business. My day job was in the Army, but most of what I did there was had to do with history. Has been, you footnote everything. On the side that I had as an enthusiast, as a fan of motorsport, I didn't worry about footnotes. Now I can see you leave breadcrumbs for people. These people need to have breadcrumbs. These people help provide the breadcrumbs, but who helps them figure out where the loaf of bread is in the first place? So, one of the things that I want to make this very clear, we're only getting started. This really should be the 8th symposium. It's the 6th. And next year, and Mark will fall out of his chair when I say this, it's going to be bigger and better because it has to be bigger and better. Why? Because two numbers come up, 75, 25. 75th year of the Watkins Glen Grand Prix, 25 years of the Research Center. And I want everybody in the room to be here. I think it's going to be a big blowout. And I think Bob and Duke and everybody involved, who's involved with this whole thing, Mark, Jenny, Josh, everybody, Sam and everybody else is out there at the organization. That's what they're looking for next year. It's all going to come to that. So please be here and bring a friend. And the same thing, I love the idea that we now are doing digital. Most of my life in the military was spent digitally, the last, say, 20 or so years, talking to people across the globe, that sort of thing. So anyway, I've talked more time than I planned, but what I really want to make this very, very clear to you is that without Mike Argetsinger, without Gene Argetsinger, without JC, without Pete, especially without Cameron, with all that they put into the idea of the research center and bringing it to life, that we would not be having this symposium. I'm just along for the ride. I'm just a troublemaker. I just manage to stir stuff up, make it uncomfortable for people to say no. As a colonel, I don't take no very well. It's usually the response is, I don't know, sir, or yes, sir. And so we started getting a lot of yes-sirs after a while. Of course, part of that was because I had Gene Argetsinger standing behind me. If you've ever dealt with Miss Gene, it's just like with the Borg, resistance is futile. Same thing with this whole idea of what we're doing. We are going to see, I think, in the next decade or two, a lot more interest in sport and automotive sport. There goes in these little cycles. We're now getting to be a point where the technologies are changing, people are looking back and beginning to see all the stuff and starting to make sense out of it. There's a lot of topics out there that have not been covered very well by enthusiasts or academics. It's a wide open field. And as an academic, that's where we go. We go where the vacuum is. There's this big sucking vacuum over here about there are topics that aren't there. The American Automobile Association and a lot that's involved with it, the FIA and its predecessors, the AICR, all that governance stuff, personalities that still have not been examined very closely, the business of motorsports from the beginning to now has not really been looked at that hard. We spend a lot of time on cars and boom, 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 but there's still venues out there. So basically, there's a lot of material for future Argetsinger symposiums is what I'm trying to get across to you. Again, thank everyone for being here. Those who are here, those who are out there in digital land. So I'm going to turn it back. Bob, you about ready? Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to turn it back to Bob, who will kick things off, and we'll get started. I think, was it Jim? Yeah, I think Jim's going to be the first one up here in just a few minutes. So thank you very much, and I'm glad you're all here. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we get to the presentations, and the first one is Formula One from Circus to Media Spectacle. Jim Miller will be our presenter, and let me get his program up. Simply use the arrow to go forward, back if you want. Yeah, no. Okay. Use two arrows.
Yeah, good.
Okay?
And where will you be sitting?
I'll be right over here. And the audience is seeing that, not this.
Great.
Okay, sir. All right, Jim Miller, folks.
Well, I'm a little more nervous than I expected to be after Don said that an academic can hope for 8 or 10 people to take an interest. So, I'd like to start by expressing my pleasure in noting that there'll be 2 or 3 other presentations today and tomorrow concerning media and motorsports. So let's add that to Don's list of future discussion topics. So I may be discussing something that's obvious to most of us in this room, but I'd like to take a first stab at describing it systematically and then offer some preliminary analysis. It's really a first draft of what I'm discovering to be a really rich subject that I hope to develop further, so please help me, right? Oops. Now, in his remark, Braun is writing in the introduction of the authorized 70th anniversary Formula One book written by Morris Hamilton. So we should take his comments as the official word. Gao was speaking informally in an interview. But I think the common takeaway from both remarks is that intentional fundamental change is underway in F1 with very specific objectives. And at the same time, there's a perceived risk of alienating already contented Formula One fans. But I want to argue here that there's something bigger and maybe unexpected, and in fact with greater consequences at play. So let's begin by looking at a casual variety of indications that F1 is becoming a media spectacle. Now, I can't help but make an aside. The presentation of drivers, I think, is a critical element of the F1 media spectacle. You know, Max versus Netflix, and now it's Max versus, who is it? Oh, Sky, and then Ricardo's travails. What's developing with drivers, and apparently appealing to many new audience members, is pretty close to reality television, which, as you know, mixes factual programming with subgenres like game shows, travelogues, talent competition, fly-on-the-wall documentaries, creating what's called a fame cycle for the individuals involved. This oversharing regarding drivers includes the mob of fans in the paddock that you saw at the Mexican Grand Prix recently. And it seems that half of Martin Brundle's Gridwalk interviews are with celebrity friends of drivers. So there's also a category that might be even larger still, that the BBC, for example, calls factual entertainment. And then I think the media net has gotten so broad that there's an in-depth profile of Toto Wolff in the current issue of what magazine? The New Yorker. Whoa. So let's begin, though, by establishing a baseline for change, a past that people affectionately call the F1 circus. What might they mean? Actual circuses were itinerant examples of live art, according to a British historian. They were sideshows on the way to the main event in the famous 3 rings. Think about track design. Critically, Helen Stoddard says that, this is a really pungent quote, "The circus promotes itself as a public fantasy, a space of exceptionalism, escape, and danger, where the rules that seem to govern the world outside have no currency." All right? F1 was informal, even a bit amateurish, with gentlemen team owners, do-it-yourself atmosphere, shoestring operations that included very limited driver salaries. So Phil Hill reports that Ferrari never gave him a salary. He only took a share of the start and finish money. And of course, all of that was against the genuinely mortal danger of every race. For my purposes, the circus was the 60s through the 80s. Now, on our last gathering here, I mentioned to Duke that I had come to several GP races here. Oh, when was that? In the 70s. Ah, the golden days, he said. And he's not the only one who might think that way. This is an image from the center's own website, and this is 1972 or 3. But beyond that, people looking back in time have characterized Watkins Glen as something special, and I think very much like the circus that I'm trying to describe, which to me hints at the possibility of making Watkins Glen a kind of in-depth case study, a baseline for comparison. There were lots of things that went, oh, how did that get in there? Actually, I think the year before they sacrificed a Greyhound bus, so that's why the famous bog came to an end. But that was part of the circus atmosphere, for sure. Now, another way, more formally, of identifying the nature of the circus was a much smaller scale with respect to race numbers and a relative lack of media attention. So here you can see how few the races were compared to today. An early look at New York Times coverage shows very few articles about Formula One in their sports pages. The television story is a bit more complicated, and it goes farther back in time than I realized. But we must remember that early on, American cable television didn't have near the penetration rate that it has now, and some of these channels were premium, meaning you had to pay extra to get them. And then, of course, many of us remember the NBC coverage as being 3 talking heads in a studio saying obvious things about the global television feed. So maybe this is a record of slowly increasing coverage in the realm of television, but mostly I think it's pretty limited. Now, obviously, the circus left town in January of 2017 when Liberty bought Formula One and immediately began a cascade of significant changes, and here are just a few of them. Media-related changes are very significant and involve big players in that industry, which I think underscores the seriousness of intent and the very substantial capacity to invest in those changes. So here's a sketch of the principal media organizations involved with respect to television in the United States. And you can see that Liberty Media is, strangely, the smallest fish in this pond. So, okay, imagine you're accepting this contrast that I'm trying to draw between the circus and the spectacle. What, after all, is a media spectacle? Well, I would say that it's a hallmark of our time, and it has these broad conceptual categories, which we could talk about at length, but we don't have time for that. So I'll just say that global scale is really important. It means world circulation, that although it's American inflected, the media spectacle has been adopted to local conditions in a way that I think has created a nearly universal multimedia form. These things take place because they're driven by a search for profit by and large. Producers, distributors, advertisers, they're all engaged in a quintessential example of late capitalism: commodification, market oligopolies, datafication. But that's complicated by media spectacles, undeniable spectacles, like Queen Elizabeth's recent death and funeral. That was not about profit making, and that conceptually needs to be clarified or reconciled in some way. So I just comment on the side about that. But then finally, it's very clear that digital media are the sine qua non. There's even the idea of media logic, in which increasingly events are designed to conform to the demands of media technologies. Well, okay, so what? What are the consequences of such a change happening? Well, I would say there are two basic interpretations. One says, this is just another step down a glorious road, and there's more to come. And there's another, which I'm going to embrace, which is more skeptical, and it sees this as a kind of acme or peak moment in the development of Formula One. And we all know, if we walk across the terrain locally, that when you hit the peak, the other side is descent. So what could that mean? Why would I believe that such interesting developments have this, let's call it, negative consequence? Well, I think there are strong headwinds blowing. Here are a couple. When you have a 4-time world champion making such critical remarks, that gets people's attention. And of course, as with the coming World Cup, charges of greenwashing often respond to attempts to address climate change by race and other organizers. And there's cost. The Andrettis seem to be frozen out, whereas the two German manufacturers have been welcomed in. What's that about? There's the larger cultural issue of younger people being less interested in automobiles and more in mobility itself. What could that mean? And then I think, really interestingly, there's the conflicting interests at root among these very complex relationships among stakeholders. These are all things that I think that could put a brake on what's developing and turn it into something else. Okay, what happens next then, if in fact my, call it a prediction, comes true? Well, here's my current thought. There'll be racing, but no races. And to make sense of that, let's look at Jean Baudrillard's scheme of 3 levels of reality. So we have primary experience, which is what's going on in this room. We're all present, we smell the coffee, we're sitting next to other human beings. There's the representation that's now streaming to the globe and amounts to a kind of peephole observation of what's actually happening here. And lastly is this new development that Baudrillard called hyperreality, right? In which new digital media allow the construction of a, call it an event that never occurred. Right? Think about 3D animated films, for example, as an instance. So with that in mind, I might suggest that, like Facebook, which has now become Meta, Formula One might move into a realm where racing, which can be highly individualized, tailored to me, I might be involved in a race. And remember, earlier we saw how Formula One itself is promoting simulations and video game kinds of engagements. I might be having my own Formula One, in which I'm the team manager and you're doing something else entirely, and we're both in very different physical places, right? A possibility. Now, does it mean that there'll be no primary site where we can smell the unhealthy fumes and hear the wonderful engine sounds that damage our hearing? Well, yes, why not? And here are some examples of things that are already happening that have that quality of reenactment, even period clothing, in very carefully defined spatial places, right? Vintage auto racing, and of course, Goodwood. They're about nostalgia. They have no practical utility. They're pleasure-filled, right? Another example would be, and I think this is very important, the various kinds of automobile clubs. And I mentioned PCA because I'm familiar with it. People come together physically. You're bombarded with material publications and stuff online. You go to events that are closed to other people. Creates a community. You meet people directly and become friends. Why not have this kind of event happening to the side of the hyper-real racing environment? But frankly, I think the best example of how that might take place with respect to Formula One is horses. At the turn of the century, there were 1.5 million horse-drawn carriages built in the United States, and there were something like 20 million horses. And we know how that turned on a dime. It transformed very quickly. And yet, today, how many horses are there in America? 7.5 million. The horse industry claims it's worth $120 billion a year. Right? So maybe the future of F1 portends a kind of highly specialized reenactment along the lines of dressage, where skills are exhibited that yesterday were just everyday activities. We could resurrect the 70s right here at the Glen. Now, final words, and I'm grateful for these. Just the other day, the CEO of Disney described the principal corporate strategy as combining the physical environment of things like cruises and theme parks with this immaterial realm of movies and animations and characters and so forth, somehow bringing them together as a combined experience for their customers. And lastly, a driver at the turn of the century who observed something special about the United States as a market, if you will, for Formula One racing. And it makes you think that maybe the seeds for the Formula One media spectacle were germinating all those 20-some years ago at the very same time when digital media were emerging. And with that, I'll stop. Thank you. So do we have time for Q&A? Okay, please. And again, I request your critical comments to help me develop this. Yes?
Hi, wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this symposium. That's great. I'm a huge Formula One fan. I came to Motorsport through Formula One and through Netflix. So this is just right up my alley.
Did you say you learned of it through Netflix?
Yeah, I came from Formula One.
You're a case study.
I'm a case study.
There you go.
Right
Good.
here. My question for you, you were talking about sort of e-racing, sim racing.
Yes.
And almost standing in, maybe opposition to the real thing.
Right.
Drawing away
Yes.
from the real thing.
Well, I wouldn't say drawn away, but different from, yes.
Different from.
Yes.
Were you suggesting that it was in fact drawing away and reducing the experience of the real thing? I only ask because Chris Chandok, who currently is a commentator for Sky and a former Formula One driver himself, says that he thinks the e-sports and the sim racing is important, like kids from India who can't afford
Oh, yes.
to
Yes.
a way to identify talent early
Yes.
and draw them, and draw them into real racing. Do you still see that happening, or do you see that not happening?
Well, I'm less interested in the esports realm as a lure for potential drivers than I am as creating a kind of an alternative world that might replace the Formula One media spectacle, which replaced the circus, because of some of the headwinds that I was trying to describe. So yes, I think the expansion of the new audiences globally have been all about younger generations who knew nothing. But again, I would say, maybe overstating it a bit, in the terms of a kind of reality television. I mean, think of how drivers use social media, which I'm sure they're required to do by their contracts. Right? Is that good?
Interesting.
Good, thank you. Yes?
Do you know other racing series are considering a Drive to Survive type of programs, or will that be just to Formula One?
I think we have an answer.
I can respond to that. NASCAR right now is doing a program. It's the Road to the Championship, and what they're doing is very similar to what Netflix is doing with Formula One. They're going behind the scenes at the shops, at the races, and they're making NASCAR seem very real. So you're with the drivers at home during the week when they're taking their kids to school, and then you're with the crew at the track on Sunday as they're working on the cars. I don't think it's getting, pardon the pun, the traction that the Netflix program has with Formula One. Maybe it has to do just with the culture of Formula One being so much, I guess, more exotic than the culture of NASCAR. But The program was being streamed on YouTube with each weekly episode, and the ratings have dropped so much that YouTube has dropped it. So kind of gives you a sense. The Netflix program is flourishing, and the NASCAR program is floundering. So
That's really interesting to know. That cultural comparison might be very important, plus the global aspect of Formula One. I do know that other sports are planning to do these kinds, like tennis, to do these kinds of things. How long that kind of proliferation of a particular way of constructing a sport can continue and be popular and so forth, Someone else. Someone give me a hard time. Why is this a stupid idea? I won't forget who you are, by the way. Okay, Joe just raised his hand.
Hi. I guess my biggest question right now is, you mentioned various other kinds of motorsport and presentations of motorsport as being the potential future. But really, we face, at the same time, an extraordinary, shall we say, movement against what motorsport generally represents. And I'm wondering how you feel about the ability of motorsport to survive the influx of electric automobiles and cell phones, where kids don't want to get in their car anymore because they want to be on the cell phone talking. But the challenges to automobile racing, other than the one type you mentioned, vintage racing, which is very popular, can motor racing really survive with those kinds of headwinds?
Well, so my glib answer, Joe, would be that that's part of the transition to racing without races. We talk about the transition to autonomous vehicles and all-electric vehicles and so on. Well, that transition is so complex for all of these things. How long will it take? I mean, you would have to rework much of the established mobility system in order to have autonomous vehicles on any scale. Will that be in our lifetimes or ever? So I think that motorsports in general are in trouble, again, for some of the reasons I tried to suggest. And I think that maybe having, a kind of virtual experience replacing it, based on, as we've seen, a kind of global stimulation of interest in international settings, is not an unreasonable thought. And frankly, I should add to that, if somebody like me is having this odd but I think potentially accurate perception, you can bet that these big media firms are thinking along the same lines and preparing grounds for it, right? So they would be part of the engine of that transition away from actual racing, possibly. Someone else? Oh, come on. They put me up here first. That's the least you can do is ask a question.
We have plenty of time for more questions. Anybody?
I would be eager to hear from someone who challenges some aspect of this.
Doesn't some of what you're driving at depend on just the age of the people in my generation? Shall I say, race fans concentrate a lot on the cars, but the people who watched the cars in the 30s, 40s, and 50s are dying off, and the younger generation doesn't seem to be interested in seeing the old-timers run very much. It's only the old-timers that want to see that run. So this is perhaps a natural progression of the age of the people.
Yes. Yeah, and I would add to that, Don and I were talking yesterday about Hagerty and how they've transformed their business model, let's call it, in just the last 3 or 4 years, with the stated goal of engendering car culture so it doesn't die off with those of us who are no longer young. There'd be an interesting, again, another place to look for understanding what might be a transition from actual racing to virtual racing. Yeah. John. Yes.
I think just a word on Haggerty there. I met McKeel Haggerty in 2012 when the REVS program first came to Stanford, and the changes that Haggerty have put in place were discussed, and the plan, it's not just, Haggerty's change has not just come along in the last couple of years. Haggerty have felt for some time that the hobby was changing, and because of the way the people involved in changing the hobby, well, what am I trying to say here? I guess I'm trying to say that Haggerty, you know, I saw McKeel Haggerty speak a couple of years ago at a conference, and at that time, he talked about how he wanted to get 6% of the population to be a member of Haggerty's Driving Foundation. And talking with people afterwards, apparently that 6% number, that's the number of members the NRA have, percentage of the population. And the feeling is, amongst people at Haggerty, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but reading between the lines, I think Haggerty feel, wow, if we can get enough people to sign up, we might be able to have the same political power that the NRA have, and that really augurs quite well for the future of our hobby. And with Haggerty, what I would say is look at how they are buying up every single conference, every single motor racing event. You know, they seem to want to own the old car space. And for a time, it seemed like a really good thing. And only in the last year or so have I begun to think, wow, do we want McDonald's on every street corner? Or did we quite like the mom and pop diner that is what car shows are at the moment? Do we really want it to be commoditized and packaged in the way that you said? So I think the Haggerty point is a really interesting one you've raised there, James.
Yeah, I agree. And their message is very overt, and it's across media and various ways of expressing it. One, that there really is a kind of sleepy interest among younger people. They just don't know it. And two, that bodes very well for the future, and we're going to, you know, fan the flames. It's a big bet. I was at the same conference. This was in Allentown, I think. And I happened to sit next to him at lunch. And he had pronounced several times already at that meeting how young people really cared about automobiles. And everything I knew said the reverse. So I pushed him a bit, like, well, what's your evidence? And it was either, he either didn't have any, or it was so proprietary he wasn't going to tell me. But I did wonder, you know. And then they began making all these huge investments, going public on the stock market and so forth. So yeah, Haggerty's a very cool, maybe the Haggerty shadow will throw itself over our gathering, and we'll come back to it in various ways today and tomorrow. Anyone else?
Anyone else?
Yes.
Just a moment, please.
Is that Bill? No.
One thing I've noticed, especially in the younger generation, the teenagers to the mid-20s, a lot of them seem to be more interested in playing the video games and social media and that kind of thing. But I noticed that, at least in my family, those that do that and their friends are bordering on obesity. That, I think, what's going to happen when you're 40? Do you think that has anything to do with, you know, they just want to sit around and play games. They don't want to move, maybe walk the dog, and that's it.
Well, I'm not an expert on obesity, but I've observed anecdotally some of what you've said. I mean, my interest would be if they're playing games all the time, does that lead them to do a similar activity in so-called real life? Or is real life not so interesting and they'll just stay with the virtual experience? Yes. Yes. Are you going to speak for the younger generations?
You know that I am, because I look around and I'm thinking, I'm one of the younger people here.
Yes.
How many of us are going to keep showing up if every time we do, we get told, get off your phones?
Yeah.
The phones are a way we communicate with people we went to school with. There are ways I communicate with other alumni. It was actually one of the main ways when I was working in Hollywood I got jobs, was a secret Facebook group for people who went to my film school, sharing jobs and that sort of thing. So I don't think the online, I guess, marketplace, I don't think it's actually going to replace in-person stuff. I think it is in addition to. And you wanted a hard time, so I'm going to say it. The fear of, oh my goodness, they're going to get rid of actual racing because there's digital stuff now, sounds a lot like an older generation having basically fears that will be unfounded in the long term.
Well, that's well taken, but I disagree with you.
Yeah.
I certainly agree with you, the first part of your claim, that being digitally engaged doesn't mean you have no life. People talk about telepresence. We all live remotely in some way now. It's inescapable. And I don't mean to make a moral judgment about any of that. But I do think, for some of the reasons I tried to sketch, and we've heard some, I think, supporting comments, that racing in particular might be at risk, and that one way of solving the problem is to move almost entirely into the virtual realm with these more limited ways of, like doing dressage when you can't ride a horse to your job, So I think those are two different observations. And I agree with you, there's generational ignorance because many of us old people are not hip to new technology. We don't use it in our everyday lives. And that leads to fear and other things. I agree that's a problem, yes.
And just one follow-up on that. I do just want to distinguish, we're talking about the hobby of racing, and I think sometimes when we talk about young people in cars, like what your earlier point, well taken, that sometimes we're talking about automobility versus actual interest in cars as a hobby.
Yes.
And I do agree that my generation is not interested in commuting with cars. We're interested in building a world in which we can commute in other ways, either digitally or through mass public transit. But I think the interest in cars as a hobby is there. So I'll just say that.
Well, that's another discussion. What, if I like to go to races, is that a hobby in the same way as if I'm building, I don't know, model railroad track things, I think it's different. I just published something recently about trying to conceptualize what it means to be an auto enthusiast. And hobbyists are one kind of model where you might think about that. So I think you're on the path to something interesting. But I don't have a race car, but I do drive a sports car. And I don't know, is that a hobby? Well, not to belabor this, but again, point well taken. Thank you.
One more question.
Yes, John, again, is there anybody else who hasn't had a chance?
Right here, one of the students.
Okay, please.
So being part of the younger generation, I think I kind of speak for a lot of us that are involved in racing and have race cars and love this hobby. We would much rather have our hands in an engine bay and working on something in person and actually driving a car compared to sitting inside all day. And it's just like sim racing, you don't get the same adrenaline and the same experience of actually driving in person and getting to keep the sport alive. So,
but you could have both. I mean, you could do this sort of vintage car racing on the side, small scale, nothing like Formula One. That could still exist, and then you could do sim racing at the same time. Again, they're not mutually exclusive.
So I promised I wasn't going to come out of the booth, but this is such a divisive topic, and we talk about it a lot on our show, and I'm on the younger side of the generation, just crossing into my 40s. And the point that's missed here, and something that we address, is how to get the younger crowd into the hobby. There's two sides of the hobby. There's the collector and classic car side, as well as the motorsport side. And there is an intersection of the two, right? Vintage race cars, etc. But the point that's often overlooked when we kind of turn down and look at the younger crowd is the economic side of this. Those of us that are in our 40s are at our peak earning potential. We have the discretionary income to start investing in classic and collector vehicles. However, when you look at the larger market, the older vehicles, let's say the cars from the 50s, I'm not going to go back to the pre-war cars, they're extremely expensive. We have been priced out of that market. So it's difficult for us to get into the hobby. So what are we looking at? As a 40-year-old, I'm looking at cars from the 90s. These are cars that were often just passed over. From a design perspective, they're marshmallows on wheels, right? They're very round, they're just very plain, mundane, etc. So you have to kind of consider what our generation is looking at. If you look further down the scale, what are these guys? What are these guys over here looking at? They're looking at cars from the mid to late 2000s. They're not looking at the 50s cars. Most of us, even in my generation, are Barracuda, Mustanged, and Camaro'd out. Those cars are $100,000 a piece now. So what am I going to buy? The V6 Camaro that was available 5 years ago. That'll be my next race car. I look to my daughter's generation, much younger, not even 10 years old. What is she going to be driving at 18? The cars that are coming out right now. Because you put the drivers behind, behind the wheel of vehicles that are about 8 to 10 years old. So you need to look at these generational gaps alongside of the economic buying potential of the hobbyists. So racing, you then quintuple that because it's even more expensive. So that's the thing that I think is missing from the larger conversation. So I just wanted to bring that up to make sure they didn't get overlooked.
Can I respond to that very briefly? I think car collection has two functions. One is an investment, and the other is, well, for fun. And you drive a car occasionally, which I think is what you're describing.
I grew up under the auspices.
Wait, I'm going to be shut off in a minute. So if you buy that there are these two functions, I would say that neither of those is hostile to the argument that I'm making. Those would be examples of these little corners of material primary experience when professional scale racing can no longer be sustained.
Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That took us down a few alleys that we weren't expecting, didn't it? All right?
Yep.
Easy to...
Get a little stiff sitting there for so long.
Yeah.
So we'll just do
use the
next
arrows.
previous or just the arrows?
Just the arrows.
Okay, just,
They're seeing this.
okay, and advance.
Yeah.
Forward is, that one goes forward. Okay, great.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Our next topic, living loud, living fast. Connections between musicians and motorsports, by Mark Howell from Michigan, a frequent presenter here at our events. Mark, delighted to have you here. It's all yours.
Thank you, Bob. And I will echo everyone's sentiments that it's nice to be back in person. I think we've missed getting together here at the Glen, and it's nice to be enjoying some time together. Just as kind of an introduction to this topic, I've been working on a manuscript the last couple of years looking at the connection between motorsports and the manned space program, and not so much in the technical aspect. I think that's been covered in quite enough detail. But I'm looking at the personalities, looking at the connection between astronauts and drivers, a lot of astronauts who were hobbyist drivers, some who became professional drivers later in their careers. And in doing that research, I stumbled across occasionally names of musicians who sort of fell under the same category as hobbyist racers, or in many cases, actually competitive racers. And so that's where this presentation sort of took shape. And so I will share some of my most recent findings with you. I am of, I guess I fall under James's category of the older automobile enthusiast. I have to get my glasses on here. Oh, and I will add, I have multiple sclerosis, hence the chair for getting around, but I will have you know that Bobby Unser had the exact same chair that I do. And I won't say that's the reason I bought it, but after I got mine, I noticed him at the Ford Museum doing some promotional and some work with the display they put in down there, and he had the same exact chair. So that's. I don't know. I would like to try and set a closed course record with this later, but the track is closed now, so that's unfortunate. We need to start meeting earlier in the year. So with that, let's delve into this, and we'll see what happens. It might seem challenging to find a direct correlation between country music legend Marty Robbins and heavy metal frontman Vince Neil, but one needs to look no further than an asphalt speedway. Despite their differences in musical genres, clothing styles, and their respective eras in entertainment history, these two outwardly unrelated personalities are more similar than one would think. That's because both escaped the demands of the music business by climbing behind the wheel of a race car. Note that I am not focusing on musicians who dabbled in novelty races like the Toyota Pro Celebrity Race held in Long Beach, California between 1977 and 2016. Ted Nugent won the celebrity class in 1983, and Donny Osmond took the celebrity win in 1991, but I am not classifying those events as competitive pro-only races. And this will be the only time you see these two together in a visual, probably ever in your life. Although, as a pro, Ted Nugent did compete in the Baja 1000 on a couple of occasions, as did Mike Nesmith of the Monkees. My focus is on the handful of professional musicians who have spent their leisure time as professional race car drivers. The two occupations enjoy somewhat of a symbiotic relationship, a unique relationship highlighted by the need for participants in both of these audience-oriented, public performance-based disciplines to demonstrate numerous essential qualities, including patience, timing, memory recall, teamwork, hand-eye coordination, and control. While it is the accumulated wealth of most professional musicians that enables them to collect specialized automobiles, it does not by any means require them to drive those exotic cars competitively. Motorsports are not for the faint of heart. Racing cars is not only inherently dangerous, but it is prohibitively expensive and both physically and mentally challenging. Perhaps it is these last two demands that link motorsports to music. Both activities tend to be performed before a paying audience, and both require the participant to be something of an exhibitionist. Any fear of failure must be overshadowed by prodigious confidence. A musician who makes a mistake will recover from their error by staying calm and pushing onward through the song. A racer who makes a mistake, on the other hand, will hopefully recover enough control to stay on course and avoid wrecking their car and themselves and others. One of the first professional musicians to climb behind the wheel of a race car was Johnny Clay, a jazz trumpeter and band leader from England who gave up the music business entirely and moved to Belgium to drive competitively. Clay made 23 Grand Prix starts between 1948 and 1956, scoring his first career victory at the 1950 Grand Prix des Frontières in Chimay, a race he won again in 1951. In 1953, Clay won the Liège-Rome-Liège Rally, and in 1954, he managed to win his class in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Unfortunately, Clay's racing career was cut short when he was diagnosed with TB in 1955. The musician turned racer died the next year at the age of 39. Johnny Clay transitioned smoothly from a career in music to a career in motor racing. But it's important to acknowledge that not all musicians who enjoy racing see themselves on a starting grid. Some musicians utilize their creative gifts in admiration of motor racing achievements and history. The late George Harrison, for example, was a close friend and admirer of Jackie Stewart. Stewart wrote a book in 1972 titled Faster, A Racer's Diary, which chronicled his 1970 racing season, a year that was scarred by troublesome race cars, unreliable sponsors, and the on-track deaths of two fellow drivers, one of whom, Jochen Rindt, was Stewart's best friend. Harrison, who had a collection of racing photographs, spent 1977 traveling the circuit with Stewart. His experiences resulted in the song Faster, which reflected on the trials and tribulations of Formula One as seen from Stewart's perspective. The song appeared on Harrison's self-titled solo album in 1979. Another musician who put his fascination with motor racing into song was Mark Knopfler. His single, Speedway at Nazareth, which is from 2000, used the challenges of an IndyCar season as a metaphor for life. And in 2010, Mark Knopfler released The Car Was the One, a single commemorating the life and legacy of the late Mark Donohue. Mark Knopfler read Donohue's 1975 autobiography, The Unfair Advantage, and was intrigued by Donohue's story of being an up-and-coming racer who wanted a chance to drive the new Shelby Cobra, a car Knopfler referred to in his song as the One. Mark Knopfler borrowed, quote-unquote, Donohue's story from the opening paragraph of Chapter 6. It's located on page 27 of the second edition, published in September of 2000. There's the academic footnote, and used it for the song's lyrics. The song is like the book in that the narrative is from Donohue's perspective. Mark Donohue himself is never mentioned. Knopfler's song, instead, is all about a young driver's admiration of a successful peer, the young driver's desire to win, and the car that helped shape the young driver's career. For many other musicians enamored with motorsports, the allure of competition is too powerful to ignore. Sadly, for these aspiring champions, ignoring their urges would have been a better course of action. As in the case of Andrew Ridgeley, one half of the famed pop duo Wham. He's on the left in this photograph. After his tenure with the group, Ridgeley took his money and his energy and chased his dreams of motor racing glory. He took up residence in Monaco and began racing in Formula 3 competition. Ridgeley's overall racing career was pretty much a failure right from the start, enabling the pop star to experience Wham from an entirely different, more literal perspective. Another musician motor racing hopeful was the Grammy-winning singer-songwriter Christopher Cross. The yacht rock icon met Ferrari F1 driver Patrick Tambay while on a European promotional tour. Cross experienced the high-performance supercar culture in Modena, had lunch with Enzo Ferrari, and suddenly felt inspired to pursue an entirely new career. Cross raced Formula Super Vs briefly until he suffered serious injuries in a wreck at Willow Springs Raceway in 1984. Following months of recovery, Cross tried to drive again, this time as part of the video for his 1985 single, Charm the Snake. The video features Cross behind the wheel, this time of a Formula Atlantic car, supposedly chosen because he thought the car looked a lot cooler because it had wider tires. Christopher Cross aspired to drive in the American Racing Indy Lights series, but he accepted the fact that he wasn't skilled enough to ever try qualifying for the Indy 500, which was one of his dreams. His physical size had racing insiders suggesting that he try driving stock cars, but Cross's motorsports career effectively stalled, pardon the pun, after a handful of Formula Super V events. That's not to say there haven't been musicians who've managed to try motorsports and achieve some level of success. One great example would be Sweden's Carl Edward Tommy Slim Borgud. And I hope I'm pronouncing his name properly, or correctly, who combined his talent as a jazz rock drummer with his love of racing to achieve a respectable driving career across a variety of European motorsports classes. Borgud developed an interest in motor racing as a teenager when he saw Sterling Moss compete in a Formula 2 race in 1959. He bought a Lotus Formula Ford from Dixieland musician and amateur racer Chris Barber, who not only raced his own Lotus, but also owned motorcycle and bicycle teams during the late 1960s. Tommy Borgud began competing regionally. He enrolled in the Jim Russell Racing School and started winning events shortly thereafter. During the 1970s, Borgud matured as a racer and climbed the competitive ladder. In 1972, he finished second in the Swedish Touring Car Championship, and in 1973, he won the Scandinavian Formula Ford Series. His career path led him to Formula 3 in 1976 through 1977, and eventually to Formula 1 in 1981. His first points-paying finish was 6th place in the 1981 British Grand Prix. After his Formula 1 career ended in 1982 due to team politics, Borgud competed only occasionally until he began racing a Formula 3000 car in 1985. After struggling in Formula 3000, the drummer drove a Ford Sierra to win the 1989 Will Hire 24-hour touring car event, and on the heels of his European truck racing championships in 1986 and 1987. In 1994, Slim Borgud won the Nordic Touring Car Championship, and in 1995, he won yet another truck racing title. During his time in F1, Borgud used his ties to the Swedish supergroup ABBA to attract potential sponsors and the media. Borgud played drums in bands like Made in Sweden and Solar Plexus, but he also played on many of ABBA's biggest records. Through his friendship with ABBA, Borgud was able to put the group's name on his Ford-powered ATS Formula 1 car for free. This method was used by another rock drummer with ties to motorsports. John Bonham, of Led Zeppelin fame, blended his love of cars with his star power to help Kay Griffith's McLaren M8E qualify for a Group 7 race at Silverstone in 1974. Other musicians merged their music money with motorsports as well. The legendary Johnny Hallyday, the French Elvis as he was known, raced in the Paris to Dakar Rally on occasion, and Shane Lynch from the Irish boy band Boyzone found success in both British GT and drifting competition. Each of these efforts was financed solely by the musicians themselves. One act to market itself through automobile racing was the British pop group Atomic Kitten, which formed a professional alliance during the early 2000s with the MG Factory team and the British Touring Car Championships under the banner of Atomic Kitten Motorsports. The group's interest was so high that Jenny Frost, one of the Atomic Kittens, from 2001 through 2004, enrolled in a racing school in hopes of becoming a driver herself. I added this for no reason other than my name is on the window of the car. And I just think that's so totally cool, even though I have no connection to it other than the last name. So anyway, so just humor me. It's just something to make my day. Just like Tommy Borgud and Jenny Frost, other musicians have embraced their interests in motorsports. In 2010, the British jazz trio Curios released an album titled The Other Place. 2 singles on the record, written by pianist and F1 fan Tom Cawley, honored the achievements of fellow Brit Jenson Button. One cut was titled Belief, and the other 2009 World Champion. Previous works by Curios have also commemorated Button's motor racing exploits. Nick Mason, another Brit and the drummer for Pink Floyd, is widely recognized for his vast collection of historic racing cars, vehicles he continues to drive in vintage celebrations like the annual Goodwood Festival of Speed that we've already talked about. And Brian Johnson, the lead singer for AC/DC, owns an eclectic assortment of exotic high-performance race cars that he also occasionally enters in vintage competitions. Yet another musician who made a name for himself as a racer was Dick Smothers. Smothers earned a reputation as a versatile driver while playing concert tours and performing on national television. Even as the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was denounced by conservatives for its criticism of American politics and the Vietnam War, Dick Smothers was racing all sorts of high-performance vehicles, including SCCA Formula Vs, NHRA dragsters, and endurance-type sports cars. Smothers raced Porsches at Sebring and co-drove Chevrolet Corvettes at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. In the 1980s, Pennsylvania native John Oates of Hall & Oates, he's the one with the mustache in this picture, enjoyed a second career in motorsports. Having grown up around sports cars near the shops of Porsche legends Bob and Al Holbert, Oates developed a keen interest in road racing. John Oates started out racing go-karts on Long Island during the late 1970s, then learned to drive Formula Fords while on tour in Europe. Upon his return to the United States, he attended the Bertle Roos Driving School at Pocono Raceway as a classmate of the late John Andretti. I actually saw John Oates race a Formula Ford at Pocono back in the early 1980s. He's not here, right? Okay. He spun the car a lot. He would go into the first turn, loop the car, come out of the dirt, and then he'd come around and he'd loop the car again. But oh well, he was having fun, so that's all that counts. Oates also competed in the SCCA's Sports 2000 class for 2 seasons. John Oates met Jackie Stewart through George Harrison, and he followed the racing career of Richard Lloyd, a British driver who had worked 6 years for Decca Records. In 1983, Lloyd put Oates behind the wheel of a Porsche 924 GTR in an IMSA race at Lime Rock Park in Connecticut, and he finished 10th out of 37 cars. An accident at Road America ended Oates' competitive racing career. He now lives in Nashville, Tennessee, where he's active with community efforts in hopes of bringing both NASCAR and IndyCar events back to Music City. In 1992, the aforementioned Vince Neil, frontman for the heavy metal band Motley Crue, pursued his interest in racing and competed in 4 Indy Lights events. He drove the Say No to Drugs, isn't that ironic, March Buick to an average finish of 12.75 and a career best finish of 10th in a race at Milwaukee. Now, we should acknowledge at this point that the music motorsports continuum goes both ways. Formula F1 driver Damon Hill and IndyCar veteran Kenny Brack are both accomplished guitarists, while Elio De Angelis and the late Francois Sievert were classically trained pianists. Sievert supposedly performed an impromptu concert at Seneca Lodge the night before his death in the Grand Prix in 1973. So if any of you local folks are aware of that or can confirm that, supposedly that's part of his lore. In NASCAR, Cup Series driver Bubba Wallace plays the drums for relaxation and has performed on stage with various bands during race weekends. And Kyle Petty, son of NASCAR Hall of Famer Richard Petty, has enjoyed quite a lengthy side gig in country music. Petty, who had 8 wins during his 30 years in the Cup Series, has also recorded albums, filmed videos, and performed shows all across the country, including at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. Kyle Petty has continued to perform his music since retiring from driving in 2008. Perhaps the most recognized motor racing musician in the United States was country music legend Marty Robbins. He recorded a catalog of more than 50 albums and scored 17 #1 singles during his music career. But there was more to Marty Robbins than white sport coats and pink carnations. There's a little reference for some of you old timers out there, myself included. Robbins grew up in Arizona, where open wheel competition was the main form of motorsport. While living in Nashville as a singer and songwriter during the late 1950s, yes, Bob? Okay. He began driving microsprints, eventually graduating to regional late models, modifieds, and stock cars. As his music and racing careers grew, Marty Robbins' interests evolved into a tradition at the Grand Ole Opry. Robbins would be put last in the lineup. That enabled him to race at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, then, when he was done, run over to the Ryman Auditorium to play the final set at the Opry. Marty Robbins drove 35 Grand National or Cup Series events between 1966 and 1982. His Magenta and Chartreuse Dodges, although he also drove Plymouths and Fords, Chevrolets and Buicks, were hard to miss. Robbins tended to find a car roughly as fast as his own and follow that driver throughout the race. During his Grand National career, Marty Robbins scored 1 top 5 and 6 top 10s and led a total of 3 laps. But that's not to say he didn't get significant attention for his on-track exploits. At Talladega Superspeedway in 1972, Robbins thrilled the crowd by passing cars all afternoon, turning laps quicker than all the other drivers. After getting up to 4th place, Robbins suddenly quit. He was going to be named Rookie of the Race when he suggested that NASCAR officials take a closer look at his Dodge. They discovered that Robbins had removed the legally mandated restrictor plates from his car's engine, which led to his immediate disqualification. When asked why he cheated, Marty Robbins said that he, quote, just wanted to see what it was like to run up front for once, end quote. And on lap 3 of the National 500 at Charlotte in 1974, Marty Robbins purposely drove his Dodge into the retaining wall at about 160 miles an hour when he came up on Richard Childress's number 3 Chevrolet sitting broadside across the track. Robbins suffered multiple injuries, including a black eye and cuts to his nose and forehead in the mishap. Took 32 stitches to patch him up. But it's widely believed his actions saved Childress's life. Given such reasoning, it's been suggested that Marty was personally responsible for Dale Earnhardt's Hall of Fame career at Richard Childress Racing. Marty Robbins drove his last race at Atlanta in the fall of 1982. On December 8th, Robbins died following his 4th heart attack. He was 57 years old. When news of his passing was announced, Marty Robbins was remembered as an award-winning musician and songwriter, but he was visually depicted in the media as a NASCAR Cup Series driver. The connections between music and motorsports are many. Both pursuits epitomize the spirit of show business. Both require highly focused concentration and impeccable coordination. Above all, both activities challenge participants to push beyond expected limits. In motorsports, just like in music, success is measured by one's ability to transcend supposed or expected norms. Being a musician means being a student of technique, tradition, and the benefits of practice. The same can be said of racing. Performance in both endeavors is measured by the quality of your achievements. And with that, I thank you for your time and your attention. Oh, and if I had waited just a little bit, I would have got the photo of Ross Chastain sliding against the wall right behind Christopher Bell here, but that photo wasn't available when I was putting this together, so.
Thank you, Mark. Your usual riveting presentation. Are there any questions? Just a moment.
Do you have any interest in record album covers that depict automobiles? Because when I get home, I'm going to go through my collection and pull out every one that has an automobile on the cover.
Well, Marty Robbins had at least 2 albums. He has one for his album Devil Woman, where on the cover it's his modified, which he called affectionately Devil Woman. So it's a nice picture of his car, kind of in profile. And then in a later album, he put a picture of his, I think it was one of the 72 Dodges that he has on the cover of that, sort of as a commemorative kind of a thing. Yeah, I'm looking for all kinds of stuff. Like the Curios album, that has nothing really to do with any of the songs. It's just a cool photo of, and they think maybe that was Jensen Button behind the wheel of that sports car there for that jazz album cover. But yeah, this has taken a life of its own, so I'm always looking. So yeah, if you find anything, I'll give you my email. You can send me the images and the publication credit that you want, and go with that. So yeah.
Hard not to get into this subject without thinking about the Beach Boys as well. I mean, they basically made a whole kind of a career out of the California car culture with 409 and Little Old Lady and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
It's fascinating because they...
Well, and I came across them. I was at one point in this research, I came across some information about the Smothers Brothers and the Beach Boys co-sponsored an NHRA Top Fuel dragster back in the late 60s. And I thought, this is really interesting to have these 2 bands that are so, kind of, sort of at the peak of popular culture coming together to co-sponsor a car. It turned out that neither group had anything to do with the team. It was people within the team who had very, very limited connections, like, they knew the cousin of a brother of somebody who was a part of the record label, and they thought, wouldn't this be cool to put these 2 bands on the car? And there are tons of photos and there's tons of information, but neither group will take credit for saying, yes, we sponsored that car. It was just kind of a sort of a vanity project.
I don't think the Beach Boys had anything to do with racing either. I mean, they were surfing and other things like that. But
Right.
still, there was that California car culture that they were promoting very much and connecting to. So that was kind of nice.
Definitely. And primarily drag racing culture.
Time for one more. Buzz?
We'll make this quick. Okay, the very first Cup Series road race took place in 1954 at Linden, New Jersey airport. And there was a guy you'll see on the race results named Jay Christopher that was one of the finishers. Well, Jay Christopher wasn't his real name. His real name was Conrad Janis. And if you remember the Mork and Mindy TV show, he was the bald-headed guy that played Mindy's father. And he was also a jazz musician out of New York City.
That's right. He was a musician.
Yeah, and if he had used his real name, he would have lost his amateur standing with his race car club. So he went ahead and he ran that one race, and I was able to track him down, and I asked him about it. He said, oh yeah, he said, that was quite an experience for me because we were gentlemen racers, and those NASCAR guys were a bunch of ruffians.
Now, and where did he finish? Do you know?
He finished like 27th or something. He only lasted a handful of laps, and he had his little XK120, and he was really afraid he was going to get it dinged up, so he pulled in. But they ran, half the field was sports cars, and half the field was the stock cars.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, those. Yeah, you can't trust those NASCAR guys. They'll stuff you in the fence as soon as they get a chance to.
All right, one of our online viewers, Darren Tahara, says, tell Mark that Brian Johnson competed at Watkins Glen in the historic race in the early 2000s.
Very cool. That's good to know. I will now have to go and I'll have to find a place around here that has archival information about Watkins Glen and see if I can find some photos or some track records or something. So if anybody knows of a place, let me know.
Time for just one more quick.
Yeah, Mark, one of the earliest musicians I know of getting involved in motorsport was band leader Guy Lombardo. He was a well-known boat racer back in, I guess the 30s to the early 50s, and at one time I believe he held the world water speed record.
Guy Lombardo did?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, okay, I haven't even looked into other kinds of motorsports, but yeah, in my NASA research, there were Gordon Cooper and Gus Grissom were boat racers. They would team up and they would do essentially like offshore hydroplane type things, and so there is kind of a boat racing theme. But I'll definitely have to track that down because that's fascinating. Paul Whiteman, the big band leader, was instrumental in the development of Daytona International Speedway. He was one of the sort of the movers and shakers behind that. And so, yeah, the deeper I dig, the deeper I go. There's a lot going on here. So I appreciate all the feedback. And that goes for anybody. Any kind of information you have, please feel free to share it with me.
Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Folks, we're going to take a quick break. I'm sorry we had to cut off questioning. Quick break at 10:45. We have a Zoom presenter from Naples, Italy. So 10:45. Thank you.
If you remember Randy, who used to be associated with us.
Yeah.
I was crewing for him that weekend. I saw his car, stiff upper lip, which highway hell on her Buckeye spray. And also, I told you that that's why he can't be in AC/DC anymore because he did wear earplugs for the lower T70. But Randy was complaining that Belinda was blocking at him in his Sonic 3.
And that wouldn't surprise me in the least. Blocking is what comes to mind when I think of that name.
And they were the two slowest cars.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
All of those guys are out of my ear because I'm so old, but it's beautiful. Just two things. At my age, it led me from remembering who the opera singer was here when the Through the Streets races started, and he was a big car player.
Oh.
I'm sure Bill Green would.
I bet if Bill's here, he would know.
I came down and my dad brought me down here for their 51 race, and I remember him talking about his opera singer and the collector. He might have sung the national anthem for
Well, Dave Garraway from the Today Show.
You were reading my
I know he ran the road course.
He raced Jag as a hunter with the kind of tiger or leopard interior.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, Dave, not a musician, but he was a disc jockey.
Right.
Before the Today Show.
So that's wonderful to know. Yeah, I need to track that opera. I know there was that clicks, but it's like I don't know either. I can't recall who exactly that opera singer was.
There's somebody in there. Somebody knows all of it. Because my brain is lost.
There's only a couple of experts in this room. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guy Lombardo's talks a lot about his gold cup.
Okay.
I grew up in Freeport where he kept his boat where he lived.
Oh my gosh.
I met him actually. He took me with his crew for the 47 Gold Cup race in Jamaica Bay. He was defending the title, but he didn't win. There was a lot of debris in the bag.
Now he was actively playing music. He had a band while he would race for a.
He was most known for his New Year's Eve.
Right. Yep, that's where I know him from.
So yes, and he was running music at Jones Beach, including stage. He was quite a big deal. But he I'm talking about Miller.
Yeah.
And he owned Gold Cup boats and had Miller B-16.
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot of history.
Well, I need to talk to you about. I also do work in Barney Oldfield, and the Golden Submarine is something that Over the years I've written about it, and I've collected all kinds of information about it, and I know that Barney and worked closely with Miller on.
I have a bunch of pictures of the Golden Submarine.
Great. But that's.
And I know all about the replica.
Buck Batterman's replica. Is that where even is that? I've lost total track of where that car is.
I'm not sure where it is.
I've lost track of Buck. I'm sure he's probably long gone. I haven't seen him in years. But no, that's the Guy Lombardo angle that's fascinating. I never imagined. That's well, if I get in a jam and need some information about Miller stuff, I know where to turn. Hi. Yeah. John Oates, I know he has said that he just got away from music and really focused on doing testing, practicing. His thing was he would show up for a race, he'd race at the Pocono, he'd fly in, race, and fly up, and he had crew that would take care of the car. All he would do was get in and ride it, and he regrets not gone a couple days early and done testing, got more familiar with the car. He loves cars. The music got in the way, but the music is what funded his hobby, And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think for some, it is this look how cool I am, or this is how it's great. The other ones who don't like Andrew Ridgely, they'll flash in the camera. I want to do this. This is hip and cool. He's picture of beautiful women riding around on scooters, and he's hanging out with the racing crowd. But he was kind of a joke right from the start. They sort of looked at him. It's cool.
So it seems like it's not as hard as I would think to separate those who actually have a passion to those who don't.
Racers know. They know the true drivers from the posers, the wannabes. And that's what happened with some things. Christopher Cross was the same way. It's like, you got a lot of money, and you think you want to do this. You want to be a race car driver when you grow up. But he goes out and immediately has it. John Oates had a horrible get out of the arrows out of Robeers and gearbox. I need to be around to play music.
Yeah, because these guys often have contractual obligations to reporting things. What you want is a headliner, even though you have your theater, to be hospital further away because they want to track. So it's really a fine line. And Richard Lloyd, that's the reason he left Tecce. He was with Tecce. He was those infighting between Tecce records. The responsible guy here, that's what he said. If you were to be a racer, then working with others. And he had a very successful career. He had to give up music. I think John Clay is I'm not being expected as a I'm being looked at as a musician. I've got all these responsibilities. I just want to drive and rest. So he was getting told.
Actors the same way. Actors get involved. Some actors are respected because they're racers, and some just jump in because they're
exactly. And I want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm afraid to.
There's a lot.
For every Paul Newman, you've got,
And some guys like James Garner was good at it, but never was allowed to do it. So you never knew how good he could have been. Right.
Bob Boder, I remember Bob Boder doing everything. James Garner, I'm been happy that he couldn't say he could have won races. You look at Michael Fassbender. Yeah, he's been racing. He ran into a Honda. It's like, yeah, so they get that whole, but again, a lot of money. Patrick Benson, a lot of money. Very free time.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Please take your seats.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's something about that exotic hobby thing. It's a lot of musicians. So send me an email. I'll send you some stuff. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Sure. Yeah, actually, I've got okay, sure. Yeah, actually, I'm bringing my business cards, but yeah. Yeah, sure. No, this is taking
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hey, Mario.
Hello?
You about ready?
Can you hear me?
Stand by, Mario. Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Naples, Italy.
Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me?
Mario, we're just about set for you. Stand by. Okay, folks. Mario Tecce from Naples, Italy. Mario, the floor is yours.
Okay, you hear me. You can hear me well?
Yep.
Okay, actually, I cannot share the screen.
Okay,
The organization should allow me to share the screen.
Yeah, try now, Mario.
You have an option to allow me. Okay, now it's okay.
Yep.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay, this is my first slide. Can you see my first slide?
Yep.
Okay.
We can't see your slide yet, Mario.
You can't?
Nope.
Oh, wait a moment. Why? Oh, here it is, share.
There you go.
Is it sharing now?
Yes.
Good.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, Mario,
You can-
you're all set.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so good morning to everybody, and I'm very glad to participate, and I would like to thanks a lot, especially Robert Barr, Duke Argetsinger, and Paul Baxter, all other organizers. I'm going to talk about race car driving and what we can say, analyzing the meaning, the goals of this activity. But before doing that, just because I am, as I heard before, an old automobile enthusiast, I would like to show the place where I work, my department at university, just because, as you can see, our teaching building is called F1. And actually this will tell you also you that my automobile passion is mostly related to Formula One. But I also think that every other different way of racing are interesting. Now, coming to this other slide, I will try to discuss about race car driving. Race car driving is an activity, in the human activity, an activity where humans can make their choices. And as any other human activity, choices can be good or bad. And similarly, even car development is similar, but now I mostly want to talk about driving. So I would like to show you that this is a positive activity, a good activity, and this is something that sometimes has to be confirmed, because it is, it happens that somebody doesn't believe that. So I will try to answer essentially to three questions. The three questions are, what is it driving? So answering this question, is it driving going to become obsolete? And mostly, is driving, race car driving mostly, good or bad? I put here this image. You see, this image is coming from Grand Prix, for a great movie, which I like a lot. You see, this is a driving image of the 60s, and you see a driver wearing leather gloves. And just thinking about that, I want to remember now François Sever, the last driver using leather gloves in Formula One. Is a driver of all times, and sadly, he died in Watkins Glen in 1973. But I want to remember his winning in 71. Was a great driver, and just remember these days we remember many most important moments of life: winning and dying. Are these things which cannot be related in race driving, or they can? So I want to start answering this first question. What is driving? We can say that driving is an effort to reach or achieve a particular objective. Driving, using this word for any kind of activity. Driving is, while driving, car driving, mostly race car driving, is acting after choosing. Which kind of acts? Steering, braking, accelerating. But before steering, one has to decide, choose to steer, when, how much, when, and for how much time. So it's a choice. And any kind of choice, any kind of human choice, can be good or can be bad. The driving became good or bad, judging this kind of action. So what I think is that driving, as any other human activity, is an occasion to be good and to do good. And next, I want to compare race car driving versus usual car driving. They are very similar. The culture is probably the same, but the difference is quantitative. Racing is a special occasion to do good compared to usual car driving because of two main factors: fast speed and competition. These are things which are specific of race car driving. Speed is important. I want to put here an answer, a question, I'm sorry, a question from Luis, again from this movie which I like a lot, Grand Prix from John Frankenheimer, a 1966 movie. Luis is a character which doesn't know very much about racing, so she just simply asks, why is it so marvelous to go very fast? And what can we answer to this question? I mean, the movie answers, all the movie answer to this question. A possible answer is it because it is associated with hazard and violence, which are for sure part of racing, especially of all times racing. A lot of hazard, a lot of violence, in the sense of accidents, fatal accidents. Luckily, this is not something of the current times. There is still hazard, much less than in, for example, 60s, 70s. But I think that the real answer is that speed is marvelous. This is something which we like because it can give you a special feeling of achievement, of doing at best. I mean, as long as driving is done at a high speed, it becomes more difficult, and then it becomes more rewarding to do it properly and to do it at best. And what can we say about competition? Race car driving is competition. What is competition? We can say that competition is trying to do the best possible using as reference all the participants. So we need this reference. Actually, this word derives from Latin, two Latin words which are cum petere. That means searching together, cum together, petere, searching for the best. So staying together to search for the best. That's the real competition. I can have the best Formula One car. I can have a very nice tech, but I cannot show that I'm good in driving if I am alone. I can show that I am good together with other participants, with other drivers. So it's something which has to be done together. Something which has to be done together and not against others. It is not a fight. It is working together to do the best. I mean, a real good driver is not the one which wants to fight the other. It's the one which wants to do the best possible. Other question, is individual car driving becoming obsolete? Probably the answer is yes. For sure, autonomous vehicles will soon substitute traditional cars. I don't know when it's going to be. Is it going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? But for sure it's going to happen. So driving is going to become uncommon, if not obsolete. I was hearing before James Miller talking about horses. Most of us doesn't ride anymore. I mean, most of us doesn't ride horses. 100 years ago, many persons were using to ride an horse. Now we have horse races, but when we look at horse races, we don't. I mean, most of us doesn't know or how does it feel to ride an horse. So probably what is going to miss if a race car, I think race car driving with all the difference and improvements and changes will continue, but probably what we are going to miss is the identification of people looking to races with drivers, because people which we are going to look to the races probably will not be themselves drivers. But the main question we have to answer, I have to answer, is generally, is race car driving something good or bad? in the past and even today, there is a lot of people, for sure not in this audience, I think, but there was, and still there is a lot of people that generally consider race car driving something bad. While I think that as any other human action, race car driving can be possibly good or bad according to the different situation, as most other human actions. But then the point is, what makes human actions good or bad? Maybe, and I will try to discuss about that. Maybe that doing good might be what we do according to our human nature. I mean, I like to think that human nature is naturally done to do good. And what I am going to use for that, especially because I like racing, I like car racing, are taking examples from car racing. So the next slide shows you now two pictures of Gilles Villeneuve, a driver which I miss a lot. I like it a lot. I think this was one of the best, and not only a very, very good driver, but also a very, very good man, which is not necessarily the same thing. Here we see here in 1981 in this Argentina Grand Prix, driving as he used to do at best on the edge, sometimes even doing excessively, but because he was always driving to do the best. And this is the reason because all of us liked him a lot, because he was not a crazy man. He was just somebody that wanted to do always the best at any cost in any possible way. Obviously, doing that, he was taking risk, and sadly, on the right, you see a picture showing him with this fatal accident. It is sad to look at that, but I don't think we can say that this is wrong. I mean, he knew that this could happen. Actually, we could even talk of the circumstances that caused the accident. I mean, his mind in those days favoring this accident. But I mean, he certainly knew that this could happen, although for sure he didn't want this. But talking about Gilles Villeneuve and talking in Watkins Glen, actually, sadly for me, in a remote connection, but I hope to come in the next occasion. I want to come there. Watkins Glen is a place which remembers me a lot about old Formula One. I want to remember Gilles Villeneuve in 1979 winning, but more than winning here, I want to remember Friday of that Grand Prix, the Friday of that weekend, where in incredible bad weather, very bad weather, he was able to drive 9 seconds faster than anyone else, 9 seconds faster. And even of his teammate, Jody Scheckter, who just won the championship in Monza. Many people say that perhaps he was deserving that championship. He didn't become world championship, but that year probably he deserved to be champion more than his teammate. But he was loyal. His team, Ferrari, wanted him to be second, and he was second. But talking about this car and Ferrari of those times, yesterday I had to add this slide. I couldn't skip to add another slide. This is not the driver, but it is a very important person, an engineer, Mauro Forghieri. Sadly, we lost him 2 days ago. He was, I think he was one after Enzo Ferrari, the probably most important man in Ferrari. He designed all the Ferrari in the 60s, in the 70s, and many of the 80s. He was able both to design engines and chassis aerodynamics, everything. It was complete, and they was able to design winning cars. A special man. Sadly, I'm not going to see him, but he will be always a special person. Now, coming to the things I was saying before, how to make good choices, I have to remember the fundamental virtues as something which allows us to make good choices. And just remembering the major fundamental virtues, which are 7, I will, before make a definition of virtue. Virtues are usual and stable dispositions to do good. Can often and also be recognized in race car driving, which is the argument which the theme which is interested us today. And there are 7 virtues. They are listed in the next slide. The major virtues, which are faith, hope, and love, which allow to select the goals of life, and the cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, which contribute to pursue these goals. What I want to do now is try to find example of use of these virtues. And I start then with the major ones, faith, hope, and love. And when we start then talking about faith, remembering Bruce McLaren. Special driver, but more than a special driver. A winning driver able to win, but also a driver able to win with a car built from its own factory. You see him winning with a McLaren car. Actually, we know that this name is still there. We still see this name in the Grand Prix with a lot of interest. But it started in the 60s, and the same man was driving his cars. And I want to cite the eulogy he did for his teammate who died in 1964, Tim Mayer, because I think they give us the idea of what is faith. He said, but who is to say that he had not seen more, done more, and learned more in his 26 years than many people do in a lifetime? I feel that life is measured in achievement, not in years alone. I fully agree with this. This doesn't mean, I think this is determination to win. Determination, yes, to take every risk, even of dying, but doesn't mean unawareness of life value. Just means determination to do good. To do good thinking even beyond life, thinking that to do good is more important than keeping our life, his life. So I think this is faith, and I like to remember this name, this person, this driver. And again, I cannot forget, I must also remember similarly Ayrton Senna. Ayrton Senna was another special driver and a special man. We miss him a lot, I miss him a lot, and I still remember him as an example driving, but as an example outside driving of his life. As you say, driving the fastest possible way, determination to win. It's astonishing for me to look at these images on the starting grid in Imola in 1994. This is just a few minutes before this fatal accident. And actually, a special day, even before starting, because the previous day, on Saturday, another driver, Roland Ratzenberger, also died on that track. The atmosphere was very, very hard, very difficult, but he was there and he started first and drove few few laps, only 7 laps, but still being first. Then he had the accident, but he was still determined to do good, to do the best. And actually, the other example we can remember is a major example is money. Now there is still cancer research going on thanks to this foundation under his name. I think this is an example of hope beyond physical life. I mean, he look at the beyond his physical life. Next example I want to make is about love. And I want to use Jackie Stewart, even this name, I mean, there is not so much to say about such a driver. He was able to win 3 driver championships, is very well known for many, many things. He's a special driver. But I want to show him these 2 pictures. The first one, remembering him driving in 1973 in Monza. I remember very well, this was a special day. He was supposed to win championship that day. He just missed a few points to win. And as the race started, this was going to happen easily. But at a certain moment, he had a puncture and they had to stop to change the tire. At that time, it was not normal to stop. I mean, it's not like today. So making a stop to change a tire seemed to be the occasion to lose everything, at least that day. The people thought that he was going to become champion in another race. But he started an incredible driving. He drove at his best. I mean, he drove so fast that actually after exiting the pits, he was the last one, and then he became finally fourth, was able to get the points to become champions that day. It was an incredible driver. There are few occasions which I've seen some driving so touching, so nice to be seen. And on the right, actually something which can be seems different. What is still the same man, still Jackie Stewart, and he's still in a blue car, but this is not the blue car. On the left, it is the Tyrrell 1973. Now, on the right, you see him on the other car, on the Matra, which he used to win 1969 championship. And actually, he's followed from two other blue cars, which his sons are driving, with the two other cars he used to win two other championships. What he does here is stop to gift a flower to his wife. I think this is an example of love. We see, I mean, we can recognize here what it is love. And the point is the same man. The two images are very different. Is this man doing very different things? I mean, they're different things, but I think the goal is similar. Is doing good in both cases. I think this is the major point. And then I want to talk of the other four virtues, the cardinal virtues, and I want to give you some examples still in racing of these four virtues. And then I want to use a lap in Monza to do that. Monza is a very well known track. Is known as the Temple of Speed. It's one of the oldest, not the oldest track, but very old. Even Watkins Glen is an old track I was hearing, I know, but Monza just a few days ago celebrated 100 years from its building. Monza is, as any other circuit, to be done with making the fastest possible lap time. And so I want to show you, while doing that, we can use the four cardinal virtues. So let's see the next one. You see here the Parabolica. The Parabolica, recently renamed Parabolica Alboreto, giving the name of another Greek driver. Parabolica is important. I mean, the start of the circuit is here. I don't know if you see my mouse moving. Yeah. Parabolica precedes the start-finish line. So it is important to make a very good lap to get to exit from Parabolica in the fastest possible speed. So talking about the full lap, I want to start from Parabolica. And to do Parabolica at best, we need prudence. What is prudence? Let's look at the definition. The virtue to distinguish true good in every situation, making the right choices. It is not fear, it is not diffidence, prudence. It's something to distinguish true good. And it is necessary turning to Parabolica. Why? Because it's a special turn. It is not a constant turn. It is a turn which opens gradually. So while at the beginning it is necessary to make an heavy braking, then you have to start accelerating and keep accelerating all over the Parabolica, increasing the acceleration because the curve opens. So prudence is necessary to choose the best measure of braking and accelerating. Next, we go to the start-finish straight. Here, the virtue which is necessary is justice. Justice can be defined as the virtue to respect the rights of those that have relationships with us. And here it is important to have this virtue. Obviously, we have a lot of rules in Formula One. Now we have so many rules. Somebody says even too many rules. But beyond rules, there is this virtue to be used. This virtue here is necessary to make the best prevention of any risk, just because it is quite easy to make this straight. The most important thing to make this straight well is to have a good engine. The difference here is making from the engine. But since we know that it is possible, and we have seen so many accidents in this straight, and even fatal accidents, so it is important to prevent risk getting close to other drivers. To do that, we need justice. Again, after that, we get to this first chicane, just at the end of the straight. At the end of the straight, we need fortitude. What is fortitude? Fortitude is the virtue that guarantees determination in difficulties, in difficulties trying to do good.
Mario?
It is necessary. Yes?
Mario, I'm sorry, we're running short on time.
Yes. I will try to be quicker.
All right, thank you.
Okay. It's necessary to wait the right moment to brake hard. So here is an important braking. Here we brake from 340 to about 80 kilometers per hour, or maybe we can better also say 210 miles per hour to about 80. Just keeping going again to the next important point are Variante della Roggia and the two curves of Lesmo, but here again we use fortitude again and prudence again. Just keep going to the Variante Ascari. Here we need another virtue, temperance. What is temperance? Temperance is the virtue which, temperance is the virtues that moderates our wishes and provides an appropriate balance using goods. What we do by this virtue? We moderate the impulse of overspeeding. Here the problem is that there are three different turns here, left, right, and the left. And the problem is if one gets a too high speed entering, and then if one enters at too high speed, exit too slow. And then by this virtue, one can drive in the best possible way through this Variante Ascari. And getting to the conclusion, I hope I'm not taking too much time. Getting to the conclusion, I would like just to say that driving in the fastest possible way is a possible mode to live, to be good and to do good, and to properly target to the future. And also just making a consideration, each of us has to recognize this personally. So is it living to be good and to do good the goal of life? Just a citation from Dante Alighieri, saying with the words that he put in the mouth of Ulysses, asking his fellows to explore the unknown world. And these words, I will not read it in Italian, but I will read it directly in English. Consider the seed that gave you birth. You were not meant to live as Brutus, but to be followers of virtue and knowledge. So we need both virtue and knowledge. Knowledge for doing best everything, for example, experience of driving. And just to get to the final slide, I want to end with a citation from St. Paul, which by being aimed to everybody, to me seems particularly fit for racers. Still with the image of Gilles Villeneuve, I want to show with this. Do you not know that runners in the stadium all run in the race, but only one wins the prize? Run so as to win. Thank you very much for your attention. Sorry if I took too much time. I'm finished.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. Time for one question. Anybody? No questions? All right, if something comes to mind later, let me know. We can, Mario's very fond of
Okay.
email discussion.
I will stay tuned. Still, I will keep listening.
Yeah. Okay, Mario, thank you very much.
Thank
It's
you.
4 o'clock in the afternoon in Naples, right? All right, you take care. And I hope you watch
Okay,
the live
thank you.
stream. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Whoops. Oh, crap. What did I just do? Oh, okay. Don't want that. Yeek. Mike Stotz, come on up. All right, this is a hybrid presentation, our first ever, so hold on to your seats. Aspects of media treatments of motor racing topics. Mike Stotz is here in person, and in Scotland is Kate Sullivan. In Belgium is Timothy Robeers. And Eric, what are we doing wrong here? Go away. Oh. No. Having a little input problem here, folks. Please bear with us. When are we getting video?
I'm here because the network's down.
Doesn't seem to be that. Something I'm doing wrong.
No, you just got to go into speaker view. Are they there? Are they ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it'll go me,
It'll light up once they.
Yeah, that's fine. Whoever's talking has precedence, so you're good.
Okay, great. And then
All right.
where are the presentations? Leave my presentation. I'm just
Yes.
wondering where it's
Right.
at.
Okay. All right, folks. Mike Stotz. You have slides?
Yeah, I do.
Excuse me.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I got it. Sorry, folks. Some teething problems.
Awesome, thanks.
Kind of goes under the heading of what the hell are we doing? There we go.
Okay.
All right. And you just use the.
Just use the arrows.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right.
Awesome. Great.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob. All right. Good morning, everybody, to those of all you who are attending here in person, and good time of day wherever you are at around the world. My name is Mike Stotz. The last time that all of us were gathered here, there was snow on the track, so we appreciate the weather for cooperating with us. Today we got 3 presentations that are a little bit different to kind of give a little sampling of different, more new age motorsport type research endeavors. We're all in some form or fashion academics. Myself, Mike Stotz, I am from the University of New Hampshire currently, and editor-in-chief of the Journal of Motorsport Culture and History. Joined today by Dr. Timothy Robeers over in Belgium and Professor Kate Sullivan all the way over from Scotland. So a bunch of young bucks, and of course we had to ruin technology just to start it off, right? So let's go ahead and get into it. Keep our stomachs from going too crazy. My presentation for you all today is a media kind of comparison between the first two African American NASCAR drivers to win at the highest level of NASCAR, that being Wendell Scott and Bubba Wallace. So this is a paper that is in progress currently. I'm just shy of about halfway through the articles I've collected, so presenting on some things that may change by the time that I submit this for publication consideration elsewhere. So the two drivers themselves, Wendell Scott won his first race and really only Top Series Cup race on December 1st, 1963, down in Jacksonville, Florida, as Bubba Wallace won more in recent memory, of course, in October of 2021 at his designated home track in Talladega, down in Alabama. So, somewhat as some of the previous academic scholars have discussed, there is a lack of research within not only just the realm of motorsport, but also within the realm of NASCAR itself. There are a couple of studies that had a little bit of precedence and a little bit of presence through my analysis, including a little bit of a survey methodology distributed out to NASCAR fans about anti-racism mobility, mostly relating to Wendell Scott's career. I'm also stealing from borrowing, I guess is the proper academic term for it, some of the techniques used by my colleague Tim Robeers just before the pandemic and applying them more in a NASCAR sense. So, a little bit more about the background on Wendell Scott. His win came December 1st, 1963, down in Jacksonville at Speedway Park, down in Florida. It was a half-mile dirt track race in which future Hall of Famer Buck Baker was initially declared the race winner. So, for all of us, I now consider myself middle-aged because I'm out of my 20s, so yay. First time Watkins Glen passed that mark, so I'm happy about that. But didn't used to be that we would keep score electronically. We had to use these weird things, pencils, pens, and paper to log down the lap times and who was in the lead, etc. It got confusing, and a lot of times led to some forms of corruption. Maybe some people's finishing position was smudged a little bit. So after the race, it was pretty common that one driver, at least one, would ask for an audit of the lap recording times and such. And Wendell Scott decided to do just this. It took about 2 hours for NASCAR officials to come back and say, yeah, actually, Wendell, you did end up winning that race. Another interesting little bullet point for this, Buck Baker was declared the winner after 202 laps of a race that should have only gone 200 laps. There are some estimates out there that place Wendell Scott as the winner by as much as 8 laps. Then, in more recent memory, we have Bubba Wallace's first win down at Talladega. During the pandemic, Talladega and Bubba Wallace had a pretty negative marriage, you could say, to each other. But coming out of that, at least somewhat from NASCAR's perspective, we see Bubba Wallace win his first Cup Series race at Talladega. Further, we see him win in a rain-delayed race. So another interesting similarity between the two drivers, outside of both being African-American competitors. We also see that the first two African-Americans to win in the highest series of NASCAR had different lap totals for the race than originally advertised. So kind of a cursory comparison there. A little bit more academic background and a little bit more into what I was looking into. For this, I was looking into how the media portrayed both Wendell Scott and Bubba Wallace. A lot of the similarities personality-wise somewhat stop after the two kind of cursory comparisons earlier. But we also see from academic research, and this is kind of a, well, no-duh situation, that whatever kinds of media we consume, it's going to influence us in some way. So if we're reading articles that continually say that, well, this driver is not that good, then we're more inclined to believe that. We also, in this piece, I wanted to tie my love for communications-based research with historical research to be a little bit more in line with the conference itself, too, and expand at least a little bit more into the digital world, particularly through the ways that I collected these articles off of an older study that myself and a couple of colleagues worked on surrounding the Tony Stewart, Kevin Ward Jr. dirt track incident. So the methods that I shamelessly borrowed from Dr. Robeers used a program called Lexamancer, and Lexamancer, giant database, a lot of times used for legal studies, but can also be used to gather mass media representations. So what I did was put in very similar search terms for both Bubba Wallace and Wendell Scott to bring down, and I accidentally left off how many were brought down for Bubba Wallace's, but in general I brought down 700 articles in total dating back to the late 1970s. So after I get done with this set, there's going to be a little bit more digging into some archives. So Mark, if you find a place that has these somewhere, let me know, okay? Perfect. Some of the very early results here. And for this analysis, what I did was going article by article, roughly, again, about half of them per driver so far, is to try and find some of the predominant themes or frames in which the media was trying to represent these drivers within the context of their first victory. So some of them are similar, some of them are a little bit different. The first one for Bubba Wallace, the main frame itself was he was the second African American to win at the highest level of NASCAR. That one's pretty self-explanatory. There were also a lot of comparisons to Wendell Scott, and herein we see some of the contradictions too, in that Wendell Scott being a veteran, Bubba Wallace kind of coming into the sport and having that as his primary job right out of the gates and into adulthood. We also see a frame of, I initially put it down as surprise in that Bubba Wallace won from the current media depictions, but there were a lot of references to his previous results and how they, by and large, haven't been great outside of super speedways. So outside of Daytona International Speedway and Talladega hasn't run as well, except for recently, obviously, he did win at Kansas. So with Wendell Scott, there was one of the main themes that I've seen so far in the early parts of the analysis were there was a heavy emphasis on his service to our country. This was one of the main predominant themes, and it was very shocking to me that we're going to talk about that instead of him historically being the first African American to win at that level. Although, obviously, that would come up next too. We would see some previous results, but in a way that differs from Bubba Wallace's, in that a lot of Wendell's previous results were talked about more in a positive light, some of his relationships with drivers at the time, such as the King, etc. And just some very cursory discussions and conclusions from what I've found so far is that these drivers, although they have very similar, at least on-track, pure results, not taking in other outside factors, at least a little bit similar successes, these drivers have been shown in very different lights, even with very similar frames being, namely right now, previous results, which may change over time. There were some differences in the driver's situation, both politically and socially speaking, that were seen throughout as not necessarily a theme just yet, but just an observation. And some of the things that we'll be kind of looking into the future with this is, Bubba Wallace himself obviously has been a little bit of a polarizing figure within the NASCAR community, and just seeing how some of the individual actions that have happened to this athlete are going to impact his career and media representations thereafter. Obviously, we had the Kyle Larson incident in which Bubba Wallace was run into a wall and then subsequently hooked. Larson could have caused major damage, also resulted in a one-way shoving match. And we also had Bubba Wallace becoming the first African-American driver to win 2 Top Series NASCAR events. So with that, just to keep everything somewhat in line, I'll go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Tim Robeers. And Tim, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. First of all, can you guys hear and see me all right?
You're a giant face, Tim.
All right, perfect. I'll just share my screen. And can you guys see this?
Oh yeah, you're good, Tim.
All right, perfect. All right. Thanks, Mike, for the introduction and your great presentation. Great to see that my methods are being used by my closest friends and colleagues. So great to see. All right. Hi everyone. From Belgium, from Bruges more specifically. A couple of years back, I was there in the snow, as Mike said. This time it's digitally. And I want to talk in relation to the media treatments of motor racing topics, specifically about sustainability. Those of you that know me, and I'll first briefly introduce myself for those that don't. I am Timothy Robeers, doctor in social sciences with a focus on communication and media. I did my PhD on media representations of sustainability in motorsports, specifically in relation to Formula E at the time, which came about in about 2013, and so it's basically the first and second generation that I covered in my research. I also have a little bit of experience as a driver myself. Participated in 2013 and 14 in a number of rally races in Africa, the Intercontinental Rally, for example. But currently I have left academia. I'm still doing a little bit of research, but I'm working in marketing, communications research, specifically on brand performance and innovation. And of course, corporate sustainability, which is something I want to talk about today. Because obviously sustainability in motorsport is something that we keep coming across more and more. Obviously here in Europe with all the different FIA series, Formula E, Formula 1, World Rallycross, World Rally Championship, the WEC, etc. They're all things where more and more sustainability as a word, we're seeing it emerge literally everywhere. It's been going on for a couple of years, and especially with the United Nations sustainability goals for 2030, it's something that will only increase in importance and significance. Now, of course, the thing is, what is this sustainability thing about? Everybody uses the word. Nobody seems to know what it really stands for. So one of the things that we've done for this research, and this is something that will be published a little bit later on as part of a handbook on the politics of global politics of motorsport, is we went to look at what sustainability means in terms of a definition, Obviously, it comes from the United Nations that developed it in 1987 in the Brundtland Report, saying that it's developments that meet the needs of current generations without compromising those of others. Obviously, depending on certain factors such as time, social context, and industry, and combines three major pillars, which is the environmental side, which is what most people think about, but also a social and an economic side. Now, obviously, we're here to talk about motorsports, and the significant thing, of course, is that ecological sustainability within motorsport really needs to be seen as part of a larger chain of developments, not just in motorsport, but also in wider society. Those pillars of ecology, social aspects, and economic aspects all are interrelated. And we've determined that it's not just something that's come about recently, it's something that's actually been developing as part of that larger structure for a while. For example, when we look at motor racing and predominantly Formula One, we've seen that in the 20th century, there was a resilience towards sustainability. Obviously, we're not talking about the ecological aspect, but the social aspect. We've seen that there was a resistance to driver safety. It was all about, in the 50s and 60s, technological developments that focused on speed and entertainment. Driver safety came about, in the 60s, when in 66 in Belgium we had a massive crash. 69 similarly with Jackie Stewart. Drivers in 69 didn't want to participate because of the risks. This evolved in the 70s with Niki Lauda as well, as we all know. So these are all a combination of internal pressures that started to build over the decades. However, they were met with little action until quite late in the 20th century. More and more was being done. Pressures were too great also externally because of the casualty rates in Formula One, which led to Sid Watkins, for example, being appointed as part of the chairman of the expert advisory committee, which of course saw positive developments to the extent that more socially sustainable frames became relevant for Formula One. And of course, this is something that sort of followed in other series as well, where Formula One, especially in Europe, is still considered the pinnacle of motorsport. And of course, as a result, it was being followed only by series after that. Now, obviously, this sustainability element is something that, especially in the last 20 years, has developed as a result of a number of reasons. I've listed 5 here, as you can see. We'll go into detail a little bit more about each of these, but these literally gave rise to the sustainability movement that we're now talking about and that we're now seeing in motorsport, especially here over in Europe, predominantly so. So the first is the digital media and communications revolution, obviously with the rise of the internet, the rise of social media. What we've seen is that there's a new media disruption that has impacted on different levels, and they've meant that there's an increased level of transparency from any company's organizational communication strategy. And of course, for motorsport, that is just as much the case. And as a result, they still do, or they started to play an increasingly important role in shaping the knowledge of and offering critical insights into different environmental sustainability initiatives, which is one step towards sustainability being so prominent as it has been. Second is mediated transgressions. As a result of that media revolution, what we've seen is that increasingly criticisms have come about including motorsport events, most prominently those that have occurred, for example, in Belgium in 2013, where the Belgian Grand Prix was boycotted by Greenpeace, you might remember. And of course, as a result, the whole media representation really influences the perception and transgression or misconduct of motorsports. We've seen elements, initiatives from the FIA, Action for Environment, etc., which they call deep modifications, green regulations, etc., which have increasingly, through media exposure, been criticized, done away with as greenwashing, green hushing as well, and of course led to the biggest media transgressions in motorsport being Dieselgate. Now, Dieselgate obviously also led to an increased scrutiny of the whole automotive industry, affecting motorsport as a result and leading to environmental activism. We all know the persons that are on the screen. The one in the middle has little to do with motorsport, but has had a massive impact nevertheless on the way also drivers such as Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, etc., have looked at or have behaved in motorsport. And as a result, that also through media scrutiny has led to greenwashing criticisms. However, the environmental activist movement has definitely meant that the sustainability aspect has protruded motorsport further and further. Even though it might be negative attention, it's still attention nevertheless. Now, a lot of these sustainability efforts clash with the goal to sell what is often considered an authentic or nostalgic sporting experience. And as a result, they can only be implemented up to a certain level before it affects fan experiences. Sustainability watch bodies followed the notions of environmental activism. Of course, motorsport, such as the FIA, have set up sustainability accreditation initiatives and have done reports on a number of track analysis, team analysis, etc., all when it comes to sustainability reporting. And of course, all of this has given rise to electric motorsports in the last 10 years, something that by many has been criticized at the early onset as something that would not be able to be sustainable. However, 10 years on, we're seeing Formula E going into its third season. We see the rise of Extreme E, electric touring car, etc. Even in the Dakar, we are now witnessing Audi in 2022 participating with a full electric rally raid vehicle. So it's definitely a step following that mediated evolution that started about 20 years ago. Now, obviously this, and I'm going to have to go through this a little bit quicker than I anticipated, this has a couple of opportunities for the future for Formula One, for example, but there's also a risk of falling out of place. Formula One, for example, envisions a step-by-step increase to use synthetic biofuels for its engines. It wants to be sustainably fueled, again, that notion of what is sustainable, by 2026. However, we already see that other series are looking at other ways of becoming sustainable through hydrogen power, such as the WEC. But the biggest problem remains fans, the travel of fans, the travel of teams, and of course the logistical elements that come with it. Proactive efforts in motorsport need to avoid being undercut by contradictory practices, and it's very important to try and do away with undercutting criticism of greenwashing, green hushing, and sports washing, because obviously the fact that Formula One and other major series are participating in environments that are not considered to be the most socially sustainable also adds to the pressures of the whole sustainability scrutiny and the mediatization thereof. The opportunity that this presented is a trickle-down effect, where motorsport in its very earliest origins was able to use its technology and technological innovations to its advantage for a race on Sunday, sell on Monday principle, which was sort of lost during the last decades. It's something that it's now gaining again. And as a result, we can see that sustainable technology is leading to an increase in manufacturers and consumers of electric vehicles. It's attractive to fans, watch bodies, and as a result, it also can attract new, especially younger demographics of fans. Which also means that lost revenue streams in terms of traditional motorsport can be regained through digital broadcasting, social media interactivities, and elements of gamification that come with these newer technologies associated with electric and more sustainable racing. So as a conclusion, the rise of ecological sustainability needs to very much be seen over a larger path of development in motorsport and an integrated framework. Societal pressures, expectations of younger demographics and disruptive new series threaten traditional ways of motorsports. And the current decade offers opportunities for motorsport to definitely regain technological and societal relevance through the trickle-down effect and the shift to revenue streams that include cause-related consumerism. Fourth and lastly, there's a transparency and consistency that is very important in using sustainability in motorsports, and as long as teams and series can show that they are engaging with it in the coming decade, that in itself is more important than saying that they have become green. The road to become green or to become sustainable is far greater, far more important than the end goal. With that, I thank you for your attention. I've gone over time, sadly enough, but I will spend no more time. I will give the word to Kate.
And hello, everyone. Mike, can you see and hear me?
Yeah, but for some reason, not the big screen.
So only Mike can see me.
No, you're like a tiny little head at the top.
It'll do. You don't need to see me any closer than that, trust me.
Sorry, folks.
Maybe take it and then go back to speaker. Take it to gallery and then go to speaker.
All right.
So go back to view, speaker.
Yeah, see if it reverses. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay. Well, if we've got me in here, excellent. I will share my screen. Thank you to Mike and Tim, and thank you to everyone for allowing Tim and I to be overseas while we're doing this. Very sad to not be there in person, regardless of whether there's snow on the ground. But as Tim said, sometimes life gets in the way.
Yeah.
I taught a 3-hour seminar this morning here in Edinburgh, Scotland, and now I'm remoting in to join you all. We will see if I can get my screen up in the midst of all of the fun.
Hey.
There you go.
All right.
All right, Kate, you're full screen. Whoops, you were. There you go.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Let's get that in. And good morning, everyone. As we've said, I'm Kate Sullivan, and I will be tying together some of what Mike did and some of what Tim did in my presentation today, which is fuel duel, how gasoline came to rule motorsports. So who am I in the first place? I'm Kate Sullivan. I'm an assistant professor of strategy and enterprise at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, Scotland. Now, by training, I'm actually a psychologist. I specialize in work, well-being, and performance, and I look in particular at what we value and how we deploy our time and energy. Part of that work has been me as an automotive historian, and I tend to look more at the cultural aspect. So the cultural turn here is exactly what I'm in for. I'm also an ethnoarchaeologist. I look at the value we place on the things we use. But more than that, I'm a car person. I'm a land speed racer. I've been to a number of events with my parents, who are also extremely active record-setting land speed racers. I have been accused at times of being the lady of the four-cylinder. I like to make very small engines go very fast, and I love vintage cars. So I love being here and getting to do this work. So let's go back, further than Tim went, further than Mike went, to the early days and the beginnings of alternative power. So motoring's early days featured a range of power. We had electric cars from the very beginning, as well as hybrid cars. Starting in even the 1830s, we had electric and hybrid vehicles. We also had steam vehicles from the very beginning, because this was familiar technology, simply being used in a new way. From there, we got to what we have today, the internal combustion ICE or ICE engine. Now, the first experimental lightweight electrics in the UK, US, and the Netherlands were in the 1930s. By contrast, Carl Benz first demonstrated his motor wagon in 1885 and didn't receive a patent until the next year. By 1893, Chicago's World Exposition featured 6 different types of electric cars. Green is as old as the history of cars themselves. By 1900, the number of electric vehicles in the United States was almost 50% of the market. Now, steam cars made up another extremely large portion, with gasoline lagging vastly behind. 38,000 cars in the United States in 1900 were electric. Think about that. From the very beginning, alt fuels have been winning. Electrobats, made in Pennsylvania, and the homebrew Riker Electric won a series of 5-mile sprints against gasoline Dorias, some of the best funded automobiles of the day, all the way back at the beginning of American racing. And we also see that alt power quickly gained land speed dominance as well. So just down the road from where Tim is, about 20 miles away, La Jamaïque, operated by Camille Genatzi of Belgium, on the 29th of April, 1899, was the first vehicle to exceed 100 kilometers per hour. 105, that's just under 66 miles per hour. This was also the first purpose-designed land speed racer, and it was an electric. If you see in this picture down here, we even have Genatzi going on a tour to celebrate both his marriage and his victory. His wife riding on the back, because it was silent and clean. We see as well the Stanley rocket, designed by the Stanley twins, built with an inverted canoe for streamlining as its body, driven by Fred Marriott on Daytona Beach. In 1906, it set a world record of over 127 miles per hour. That record stood for a steam-powered vehicle until August of 2009. It took that long for steam power to again see that kind of dominance. The rocket still holds the record for any vehicle of 30 horsepower or less. But if alt fuels were doing this well, why did gasoline win? Why did the alt fuel racers disappear almost completely by 1910? Well, one of the major reasons was a change in format, particularly in the United States. We moved from straight line races and speed contests to road and oval tracks. In America, this was largely because we had a preference for oval track horse racing, and we already had these tracks available. So simply putting cars on an existing track allowed us to then have demonstrations of hippodromes, for instance, at agricultural fairs. It also improved the spectator experience. Instead of waiting for a single pass of a car, you could sit in the stands and watch them lap multiple times. Plus, having a controlled environment helped to minimize public safety concerns. as Tim said, this has been a point of development throughout racing history. Now, these longer races then started giving the advantage to gasoline. They're fast and easy to refuel, and they have a longer range. It takes a while to get a steam car up to pressure. They have to be refueled of two different types, whatever's being used for combustion and the water tank. And then on top of that, electric cars, back in the day as today, take a few hours at best to refill. Now, there were swappable batteries then, but they were large, they were clunky, and you could fill a petrol tank much quicker. We also saw concerns of safety, again, as Tim mentioned. In 1902, the electric Baker torpedo, in a demonstration searching for a high-speed record, killed 2 people when the steering went awry and it careened into a crowd at an estimated 104 miles per hour. The driver and his engineer survived because they were wearing seatbelts. This was, in fact, the first vehicle to be outfitted with them. However, the driver and designer, Baker, was arrested for murder and released the next day. There began to be concerns about electric and steam vehicles in particular being dangerous because of all that torque from initial start. The Stanley brothers pulled out of racing despite their success after Marriott took a new version of the rocket out and had an absolutely spectacular crash that we can see the aftermath of in the center picture, where basically it's astonishing Marriott lived. First person on the scene was a doctor who had to put his eye back in its socket. He got up, walked away, and wanted to race again. In terms of general safety, electric cars, if you get in a crash, electrical fires are difficult to suppress, and steamers, as we see in the far picture, have a tendency to explode. The boiler just goes up and takes everyone with it. Not ideal. We also saw issues of reliability. Many early racetracks were in the north, and electric cars, then as now, don't perform well at low temperature. So particularly in the United States and Northern Europe, where most racing was developing, these cars simply could not compete with an internal combustion engine in winter. And there was startup. Steam cars take time to bring to pressure, and the development of the electric starter changed the game for gasoline racing. So why are alt fuels on the rise again, as Tim noted? Well, public opinion. As Tim said, there's a focus on sustainability and emissions, as well as a focus on noise concern. And this presentation is part of a broader paper that I'm developing that brings in media similarities between public opinion and worries about sustainability, emissions, and public safety, as well as noise and sociability concerns that are almost identical in the 1900s and 1910 press as they are today. We also see better technology. There's better batteries, there's longer life and faster charging, not to mention some of the more ecological fuels that Tim mentioned. So how do we boost interest in motorsport as a whole, knowing this history and knowing the ups and downs of racing in the public eye over the years? Well, first, calling back to what Tim said, trickle down 2.0, technology diffusion. Race on Sunday, sell on Monday has always been a major motivator. It's stated on the Porsche website as one of the reasons that Porsche, after many years out of the electrics game, is getting back into it by relaunching its expertise from the late 1800s in electrics and hybrids. We see the faster recharge and longer range, and we're able to use all of this to expand motorsport appeal through marketing. Through the sustainable and technological nature of Formula E, we can get people who wouldn't be interested regularly to potentially welcome motorsport into their lives. And we can lean into sustainability in our communications. We can influence the media to tell this story of motorsport's enjoyment, sustainability, and excitement as we re-enter a green period in motorsports history. And with that, I'd like to mention, as Mike did at the beginning, the three of us are involved in the Journal of Motorsport Culture and History, which in some respects traces its beginnings to part of the Argetsinger, when Mike had this idea for a journal that focused on culture and history instead of simply technical aspects of motoring and motorsport. He brought the idea up. Several of us at a previous symposium thought it was a marvelous idea. And lo and behold, there was the founding of the journal of the JMCH in 2019 by Mike, with editorial contributions and direction from other regular contributors, and occasional submissions and editorial from me as well, with Tim sitting on the board. And we're accepting academic papers on cultural and historical turns in motorsport, exactly what we look at the Argetsinger. And this can be sociology, cultural studies, communications, history, the psychology and performance of sport, which I look into. And this is a peer-reviewed journal. We welcome your submissions. You can look us up online, and I have the link put here on my slide. We would love to see some of the papers that come out of this conference. And with that, let's remember that what's old is new again. Green doesn't have to mean the end of motorsports. In fact, it's only the beginning, as we've already seen through time. Thank you all so very much.
Okay, thanks. So to keep your stomachs happy, if you have any questions for us, you can direct them to me and I can give them to my colleagues overseas. But on behalf of all of us, thank you all so much for your attention and time. And yeah, any questions, we'll be happy to answer during lunch and such. So thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Lunch break now till 1:30. So we've, the presenters and the Alfred State students are having lunch in a room over there. That's a private affair, separate affair. With the rest of you till 1:30 to duck into town if you want to pick something up. If you need some advice, recommendations on where to go to get in and out quick, please see any of the IMRRC center staff. Or ask me and I'll get you to the right person. All right, thank you much.